You ever move into a neighborhood that feels just a little too perfect, like it's straight out of a Hallmark movie but without the emotional depth? That was Aspen Hollow. I mean, picture this. Tree-lined streets, porch swings that actually get used, neighbors who wave like they've just finished baking you a pie. No HOA, just peace, order, mutual respect. You mow your lawn, I don't judge your flamingo. Fair deal, and for a while, it worked. No turf wars, no clipboard tyrants, no passive-aggressive notes about your trash bins. That is, until Margot moved in. Margot Blythe. Age, somewhere between PTA president and cult leader. Vehicle, pristine Volvo. Hair, weaponized bob cut. And most importantly, always armed with her two favorite accessories, a clipboard and an unearned sense of authority. She moved into 11 Ashwood Lane, prime corner lot, big front yard, decent porch swing. And within 72 hours, she'd introduced herself to the block with flyers titled Aspen Hollow Community Compliance Guidelines, printed in Comic Sans, of course. Like any true villain, no one had voted for her. No one asked for rules. But Margot? Margot declared herself president of the Ashwood Lane Community Development Council, a council that, by the way, consisted solely of her and her Shih Tzu Winston, who was listed as vice chair. And yes, she made a logo, a little eagle clutching a garden hose. Because nothing says civic pride like bird-themed plumbing propaganda. I didn't think much of it, at first. We've all had that neighbor. But then she showed up at my door, pointing to my lawn and asking if my underground sprinkler system had been city certified. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a neighbor with too much time. This was a one-woman HOA cosplay operation, and I was about to become her main character. Before we go deeper into this suburban saga of sabotage, stormwater, and a showdown that made the local news, drop a comment below if your neighborhood's got a Margot. Smash that like button if you've ever been personally victimized by someone with a clipboard. And hey, subscribe if you're into justice, lawn gnomes, and watching tyrants self-destruct. Because trust me, this gets wetter, weirder, and way more personal. Now, I wish I could tell you Margot was just a one-week wonder. You know, waves a few flyers around, rants about curb appeal, then fades into the background like a bad HOA fever dream. But no, Margot doubled down. Exactly 6 days after moving in, she rolled out a welcome packet to every house within 6 blocks. 6 blocks, I counted. Inside, laminated pamphlets, community compliance forms, a QR code to a Wix-made website, and, get this, a mission statement. The top read, Aspen Hollow Community Development Council, restoring order to the wild west of suburbia. I mean, who says that? This isn't Tombstone, Arizona. It's a cul-de-sac with 2 labradoodles and a little free library shaped like a toadstool. Margot didn't just create a fake HOA, she created a government in her mind. And she gave herself every title you could think of. Council President, Compliance Director, Chief Aesthetic Officer, Acting Liaison to the City, whatever that meant. And yes, her dog Winston was officially Vice Chair of Enforcement. Every document was printed with a logo, a bald eagle perched atop a garden hose, wings flared like he was about to scream, "No flamingos." It would have been hilarious if it hadn't gotten so real so fast. By the end of the second week, neighbors were getting hand-delivered compliance violation warnings. These weren't casual notes. No. Margot printed them on parchment-style paper, sealed them with wax stamps, and folded them like medieval decrees. I half expected a pigeon to drop one from the sky. The violations: improper curtain tone visible from the street, unauthorized mailbox ornamentation, excessively cheerful wind chimes, and my personal favorite, overconfident garden gnomes. You think I'm joking? I wish I were joking. There was a whole subsection on emotionally disruptive yard decor. Apparently my neighbor Sheila's gnome, named Jerry, was too smug-looking. Margot wrote that in ink. But here's the thing. Most people at first didn't push back. They thought, oh, she's just a harmless busybody. They tossed the letters, ignored the flyers, let it go. Not me. See, I've spent my life reading technical specs, calling out bogus contracts, and navigating red tape like it was a sport. So when a lady with a clipboard and a made-up title tried to tell me how many times I could run my smart sprinkler system in a week, I didn't just raise an eyebrow. I raised a file folder. I started tracking everything, and that's when I noticed something deeper. Margot wasn't just bluffing. She was playing the long game, because next thing we know she starts emailing the city. Yeah, the actual city of Aspen Hollow. She somehow got access to the city's community engagement portal, which, by the way, is meant for registered neighborhood associations, and submitted documents claiming she was representing the Aspen Hollow CDC. She even attached a PDF bylaws packet that included phrases like, "Residents must seek visual harmony with adjacent properties. Compliance disputes will be resolved by the Executive Council, C, me, and Winston. All watering schedules must align with CDC hydration flow policy." Hydration flow policy? What is this, a sprinkler tribunal? But it worked. Because one sunny Tuesday, a city inspector named Derek showed up with a clipboard of his own, looking extremely confused. He asked if I'd recently updated any plumbing or water redirection systems. When I said yes, he nodded and mumbled something about an HOA complaint regarding unregistered graywater use. My jaw hit the porch. She got the city involved. She had submitted fake bylaws to a real system, gotten city backing, and launched what can only be described as a bureaucratic airstrike on my yard. And let me tell you, when a man in khakis and a city-issued lanyard starts quoting you policies from a packet signed by a dog, you know things have gone off the rails. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because I knew I was dealing with someone who had no boundaries, no board, and no actual legal limit. Margot wasn't just trying to control aesthetics, she wanted power. Real power. Paper power. Power that comes with seals, signatures, and a false sense of importance. And the worst part? She'd gotten just enough people to play along. Not because they believed her, but because they were tired. Tired of arguing, tired of notes, tired of confrontation. That's how these people operate. Not with actual authority, but with persistence, paper, and paranoia. But not me. Because if Margot wanted a paper war, I had filing cabinets. If she wanted to wage battle over water pressure, she had no idea who she was dealing with. And trust me, the storm was coming. If you've ever had a neighbor weaponize paper against you, hit that like button, drop a comment if your HOA horror story beats emotionally disruptive wind chimes. And, hey, subscribe, because next time we talk sabotage, underground pipe cuts, and the day my hydrangeas flew 10 feet in the air. Stick around. It gets wet. Up until this point, Margot was waging her little paper crusade across Aspen Hollow like a clipboard Napoleon. Everyone got a taste. Sheila with the smug gnome, George with the off-tone curtains, even poor Mr. Hall, who got cited for mailbox posture. But me? I was the big fish. Why? Because I didn't just ignore Margot, I questioned her. And there's one thing authoritarian neighbors hate more than lawn flamingos: resistance. It started small. First, I got one of her infamous parchment-style warnings tucked into my screen door. "Unauthorized water flow scheduling," she wrote, as if I was running a covert irrigation cartel. Then came the photos. Yes. Actual photos of my lawn. Grainy, zoomed-in shots clearly taken from her second-floor window. Time-stamped with passive-aggressive red circles like I was caught on a crime show. I half expected a CSI team to show up and test my soil for unlicensed hydration. Next, she printed out those photos and mailed them to me from across the street with a $1.68 stamp. She claimed my sprinkler system, which I had custom-built, programmed, and lovingly optimized over 3 summers, was destabilizing the street's aquifer equilibrium. I didn't even know we had an aquifer equilibrium. One morning I stepped out to grab the paper, and there it was, a neon orange door hanger labeled "Final Notice. Environmental tampering, immediate reprogramming, required." Margot had officially escalated from clipboard warrior to hydrological enforcer. But here's where it crossed the line. That afternoon I saw her, in my yard, behind the hydrangeas, crouched, with binoculars. You ever lock eyes with someone hiding in your landscaping at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and think, "Yeah, this seems sane"? I didn't yell. I took a photo. Because at that moment, I realized, this wasn't just about sprinklers. It wasn't about lawns. It was about control. And I had become her final boss. She wasn't trying to enforce order. She was trying to break the one person who didn't cave. And something told me, if she couldn't do it with paper, she'd try something worse. So, I did what any rational, slightly paranoid suburban warrior would do. I installed motion-activated cameras, voice recording doorbells, and, yes, A gnome with night vision eyes. George helped. Don't ask. Because I wasn't just defending my lawn anymore, I was preparing for war. And spoiler, Margot was just getting started. Hit that like button if you've ever been targeted by a clipboard tyrant. Comment below if your yard's ever been used for a surveillance op. And don't forget to subscribe, because next time, we go underground. Literally. Sabotage, system failure, and a flood nobody saw coming. Except Margot. She caused it. It was a Thursday. One of those picture-perfect suburban mornings where the birds are chirping, the sun's out, and your coffee hits just right. And then the man with the vest showed up. I was in the garage fixing a loose sprinkler head when a white pickup truck rolled up. No logo, just dust. Out steps a guy wearing a bright neon orange safety vest, aviator sunglasses, and a laminated badge that said "Hand to God, Water Enforcement Technician." I blinked. Excuse me? He looked at a clipboard like it held state secrets. Sir, we've received a water violation report regarding unauthorized irrigation activity on this property. I'll need to inspect your system. Now, I've worked with actual city inspectors before. This guy? He looked like he just walked off a construction site in a Lowe's commercial. And that laminated badge? It said Environmental Control Division, but the watermark was a palm tree. This, from the city? I asked. He hesitated. We're contracted through a community liaison initiative. And I'm bad man. Before I could ask more, Margot emerged from across the street, arms folded, smug expression locked and loaded, like she was filming a reality show called Hoarders, Lawn Edition. She waved toward us. It's standard, don't make a fuss. I made a fuss. Sir, I said to the inspector, do you have identification, work orders, a warrant? He blinked. Ma'am said you'd cooperate. Oh, ma'am said, did she? At that point I realized this wasn't a city employee. This was Margot's hired help. Probably someone she found off Craigslist, paid in gas cards and guilt. Okay, I said slowly, you're trespassing, and unless you can show me legal authority to be on my property, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. He didn't argue, just mumbled something about miscommunication, climbed back into the truck, and peeled off. But Margot? She lost it. She marched up my driveway like she was storming the Capitol. You are obstructing community enforcement protocols, she shrieked. You're actively resisting compliance. I just sipped my coffee and stared at her like I was watching a documentary about how not to make friends. This is bigger than you, she snapped. I've submitted full documentation. Your system is a threat to environmental safety. It's affecting groundwater stability. I couldn't help it. I laughed. You're yelling at a man about groundwater stability while standing on my tulips, I said. That was it. Her face went red, clipboard shaking in her hand. You'll regret this, she screamed, pointing her pen like a wand of suburban doom. Spoiler alert, I wouldn't, because 2 days later a real city inspector named Monica showed up, with a real badge, a real ID, and the actual city truck with the logo on the side. I'm here following up on multiple complaints filed by someone named Margot Blythe, she said with the sigh of someone who had already dealt with her once too often. I walked her through the whole system, timers, tanks, sensors, drain failsafes. Monica was impressed. She said it was one of the most efficient residential water setups she'd ever seen. And then I handed her the folder. Inside, photos of Margot's fake inspector, screenshots of her fake bylaws, a printed copy of the Craigslist ad where she'd hired irrigation consultants, and a statement from my neighbor George, who watched Margot directing the guy from behind a hedge like it was a military operation. Monica's jaw dropped. This is impersonation, she said, and illegal use of city systems. I smiled. Told you it was going to get interesting. Turns out Margot had submitted over 9 fake violation reports, all referencing her made-up HOA authority and fake Development Council credentials. She even signed them M. Blythe, Community Executive Director, a title that doesn't exist in any known legal structure. City Hall wasn't happy. They launched an internal review of every submission Margot had ever made. And guess what? She wasn't just making things up. She was filing for reimbursements. You heard that right. She billed the city for emergency community water surveillance, compliance printing supplies, and a $279 drone labeled Aerial Compliance Monitoring Tool. The drone? She used it to film people's lawns. The footage? She posted it in a Google Drive folder titled Visual Evidence of Disorder. You can't make this up. So yeah, Margot unleashed a fake inspector on my property, and in doing so, she opened a very real investigation. If you've ever had someone fake credentials just to feel important, hit that like button. Drop a comment if your neighbors ever tried to play cop with a clipboard. And hey, subscribe, because in the next chapter, Margot crosses the final line. She digs where she shouldn't, cuts what she can't understand, and ends up triggering something no one could stop. 1,000 gallons of justice. The thing about pressure is, it builds quietly. One day it's just a small leak you're too tired to fix. The next, it's a geyser turning your rose garden into a reenactment of the Poseidon adventure. And thanks to Margot and her garden shears diplomacy, we had officially reached the geyser phase. It started as a slow hiss. I was in the kitchen, sipping my third cup of coffee, pretending life was normal. Then, I noticed a weird bubbling in the soil outside the window, right where my main control valve was buried. I grabbed a flashlight and walked out, heart already sinking faster than my lawn was about to. The ground felt soggy, like walking on a soaked sponge. And then, pop! A deep crack echoed under my feet like a giant soda can getting crushed. And then it happened. A jet of muddy water exploded out of the ground, with enough force to launch one of Margot's compliance roses into low orbit. My hydrangea bush literally tilted sideways. My yard became a fountain of vengeance. By the time I shut off the master valve in the garage, it was already too late. The backup tank, my 1,000-gallon underground rainwater collector, had been sliced during one of Margot's compliance gardening sessions. The fail-safe release valve had been severed. The overflow route? Blocked by soil collapse. Result? Full pressurized failure. Translation? The water had to go somewhere. Guess where it went? Downhill, straight toward Margot's house. I sprinted out front, just in time to see water burst through the drainage channel next to my sidewalk like the finale to a very illegal water park. It ran across the street like a tidal wave of karmic retribution, rushing straight into Margot's front yard. Her porch steps vanished. Her birdbath floated. The little flag that read, Pride, Order, Excellence, was now doing backstrokes. Neighbors came out of their homes in slow-motion confusion. George stood there, mouth agape, coffee halfway to his lips. Clara gasped. Did you flood her house? Technically, no. Margot did. She cut the wrong pipe. I just built a system that noticed. But Margot didn't see nuance. She saw her garden shed start to tilt like the Leaning Tower of Petunias. And then, right on cue, her brand new concrete patio cracked down the middle. She stormed outside in boots and a bathrobe, yelling, "This is terrorism, hydrolytic terrorism." I swear on my mother's lasagna she used those exact words. I just stood on my porch, soaked sock in one hand, and waved. "Didn't your fake inspector mention the load limits of subsoil expansion?" I shouted. She screamed something about calling FEMA. Meanwhile, the water didn't stop. It pooled, redirected, and pushed open her shed door, where she'd been hoarding all her HOA flyers and her precious compliance binder. The binder floated right down the street, past George's mailbox, like a soggy surrender flag. The city showed up within an hour. A real response team this time. Utility trucks, engineers, even a drone unit that surveyed the flood zone. I handed them the whole file. The sabotage, the fake HOA, the severed pipe, the video of Rick from Craigslist, and a little plastic bag with the broken pressure valve Margot had, accidentally, yanked out with her trowel. The city engineer, a woman named Tanya, reviewed everything, eyes wide. "Wow," she said. "This is unprecedented." "Welcome to Aspen Hollow," I said, "where the HOA isn't real but the flood sure is." By the end of the day, 5 homes had minor foundation shifts, 2 driveways cracked, 1 shed collapsed. 1 fake president was soaked to the soul and screaming about lawless wetlands warfare. Neighbors stood around quietly, watching Margot argue with a city official about the spirit of community regulations. You could feel it, the shift. People weren't afraid of her anymore, because Margot had built her empire on fear and fake letters. But nature doesn't follow bylaws. She wanted control. She got consequences. Like this story? Smash that like button. Ever had a neighbor flood themselves trying to ruin you? Tell us in the comments. And for the real storm that's coming, subscribe. Because in the next chapter, Margot's not just facing angry neighbors, she's facing the city. And the city brought receipts. You'd think after unleashing an unlicensed geezer, flooding her own lawn, and watching her HOA manifesto float down the gutter like a forgotten New Year's resolution, Margot would finally back off. You'd think the restraining order, the real city investigation, and the soggy remains of her compliance command center would be enough to end the madness. But no. You see, some people hit rock bottom and look up. Margot? She pulled out a shovel and started digging through the bedrock of delusion. It started with an envelope, thick, cream-colored, embossed, delivered to my mailbox by certified mail like it was a royal decree. The sender? Blythe plus resident 114 civil case no 23, hoax. 9. I opened it on my porch with George watching. He had popcorn, I had a migraine. Inside, a full lawsuit. Margot was suing me for reckless hydrological negligence, intentional psychological distress, and wait for it, hydraulic intimidation. Yes, she brought that term back. According to the 13-page complaint, I had weaponized water systems for the purpose of mental warfare, used unregulated aquatic architecture to destabilize community harmony, and, my personal favorite, engaged in atmospheric manipulation via sprinkler mist to trigger neighbor paranoia. I showed the letter to my lawyer. He laughed so hard he snorted LaCroix. This looks like it was written by someone who got rejected from jury duty and took it personally, he said, flipping through pages. She's citing fictional HOA regulations and a city noise ordinance that was repealed in 1998, but technically, it was a real filing. She'd gone to small claims court, filed paperwork, paid the fee, checked every box marked "I am not insane" with what I can only assume was a crayon. We filed a countersuit, vandalism, fraud, and about 8 other things that fell under the general legal category of don't do this in a civilized society. But Margot wasn't just throwing paper. Oh no, she held a press conference from her front yard with a megaphone and a folding table covered in binders labeled Truth. Clara walked by and filmed the whole thing. Margot, hair windblown and eyeliner aggressive, shouted to a non-existent crowd, "This isn't about water, it's about justice, about law and order, about protecting our children from unlicensed pressure valves." Kids riding scooters down the street just blinked at her. George leaned over and whispered, "Did she just declare war on plumbing?" Even the birds stopped chirping. She passed out flyers. Again, this time featuring an artist rendering of me standing on top of a sprinkler system with devil horns, flooding the block like I was some kind of suburban Poseidon. The flyer read, "Exposed. The water warlord of Aspen Hollow, below. Trial of the century, coming soon." Spoiler, it wasn't. Because the day we showed up in court, the judge didn't even try to hide his smirk. He looked at Margot's file like it had personally offended his education. "You are suing for emotional flooding?" he asked, deadpan. Margot stood tall. "Your Honor, the mist from his sprinkler system carries emotional weight. My roses have suffered trauma." My lawyer raised a hand. "We have video of her cutting his pipes, Your Honor. We played it. There she was, kneeling in my hydrangeas with a mini hacksaw like a pocket-sized vigilante." The courtroom chuckled. Margot did not. She pivoted fast. "Accused me of retaliatory irrigation. Said my underground tanks were part of a secret government program." "Yes." "Really?" The judge removed his glasses. "Ma'am, I'm going to stop you right there before we need to call a wellness officer." In the end, her lawsuit was thrown out. With prejudice. Which, if you're not familiar with legal terms, is the courtroom equivalent of, "Don't ever bring this nonsense back here again." Our countersuit? Still very much alive. The judge ordered a full review of Margot's actions, and the city, who had just finalized their own investigation, joined the complaint. Suddenly, Margot wasn't just battling me, she was battling municipal law. And that's a war no clipboard can win. Ever been sued by a neighbor who flooded their own house? Drop your wildest HOA stories in the comments. Hit that like button for every fictional title Margot invented, and subscribe because next time, the sheriff shows up. And Margot goes full meltdown. There's a moment in every ridiculous battle when things shift, not because the noise gets louder, but because someone finally listens. For us, that moment came with the sound of boots on pavement and a voice on a bullhorn yelling, "City enforcement, step aside please." But let's back up. Because before the cavalry arrived, I had some work to do. After Margot's failed lawsuit, her backyard TED Talk on water warfare, and those flyers with my face photoshopped onto a tsunami, I realized something. I had enough. Not just to defend myself, but to end her fake empire. So I sat down at my kitchen table, surrounded by manila folders, coffee, and rage. What did I have? Footage of her cutting my irrigation lines. Recordings of her hired Craigslist saboteurs. Emails she faked using a HOA email with her cat as the vice president. Financial docs showing she tried to build the city for emergency aquatic disruptions. And of course, the infamous compliance binder. Now water-stained and smelling faintly of mold and delusion, I organized everything into a legal packet that looked less like a complaint and more like the script for a Netflix docuseries. My lawyer sent it to the City of Fairgrove's Municipal Oversight Department. And guess what? They didn't laugh. They didn't dismiss it. They opened a formal investigation. 3 days later, a city inspector named Tanya Vasquez knocked on my door. Hard hat, clipboard, and the look of someone who'd already read way too much about Margot. "Let me guess," she said, flipping her file open. "You're the one with the underground sprinkler apocalypse." "That'd be me," I said. "Welcome to the weirdest cul-de-sac in America." We walked the property. I showed her everything, the broken valves, the overflow tank data, even the hydrangea bush that had never emotionally recovered. Tanya nodded, silent, focused. Then she said, "We've had complaints about this woman before, but nothing this coordinated." And that's when I found out. Margot wasn't just tormenting me. She had filed fake citations on 17 other homes, all under the name of the Aspen Hollow Residential Order Committee, a committee that, surprise, didn't exist. She'd billed retirees for unauthorized garden aesthetics. She fined a disabled veteran $100 for non-regulation trash bin posture. She told a single mom her inflatable pool violated water neutrality guidelines. It wasn't enforcement, it was extortion. Wrapped in a fake HOA letterhead and sealed with psychotic confidence, Tanya didn't say much. She didn't have to, because the next morning I opened my front door and saw city vehicles lining the street. Real ones, marked. Official. There was a utility truck, a code enforcement van, and, my favorite, a white SUV marked Municipal Legal Services, Fraud Division. The clipboard squad had finally met their match. They headed straight to Margot's house. And the neighborhood? We came out like it was the 4th of July. Lawn chairs, coffee mugs. Some people brought snacks. George even brought a Bluetooth speaker and played Eye of the Tiger as the officials walked up Margot's steps. She answered the door in her usual outfit, robe, slippers, and emotional denial. At first, she tried the charm tactic, smiles, waving. "Isn't this just a misunderstanding?" Then Tanya handed her a formal citation for impersonating a civic entity, unauthorized infrastructure tampering, filing fraudulent reimbursements, and, oh yes, falsely issuing legal notices. Margot's smile evaporated. "This is political," she shouted. "It's harassment. You're all in on it." She actually pointed at me and yelled, "He built a weaponized yard." Tanya blinked. "Ma'am, you literally cut his water lines and hired a guy named Rick to dig up his front lawn at midnight." Margot screamed something about resisting tyranny and slammed the door. The officials didn't flinch. They slapped a bright orange violation sticker on her storm door that read, "Civil Investigation Active Entry, Subject to Review." It was the HOA version of an eviction notice, only legal. Neighbors started clapping, one by one. Then came the chants, "No more Margot, no more Margot." It wasn't just petty revenge anymore. It was a community awakening. That night, Clara launched a petition to form a real neighborhood committee, with votes, rotating leadership, and bylaws that didn't include acceptable wind chime tones. And guess what? Every single house signed it, except one, Margot's. But she wouldn't be signing much longer, because 2 days later, a letter from the city attorney's office hit her mailbox. Notice of Civil Action, Case No. 23-1183. The charges? Fraud, harassment, public endangerment, and misuse of municipal resources. I watched from my porch as Margot read it, Her face turned a color I can only describe as expired beetroot. Then she ripped it in half. Then she screamed. Then she marched inside, slammed the door, and for the first time in weeks, didn't come back out. The neighborhood? It exhaled. But me? I was just getting started. Because now, it wasn't just about Margot. It was about every fake fine, every sabotaged pipe, every senior citizen she shook down with fake legal threats. And the law was on our side now. Hit like if you've ever wished karma came in a clipboard-proof package. Comment below if your town needs a Tanya. And don't forget to subscribe, because next episode, the trial begins. And, Margot? 3 months later, we stood outside Fairgrove County Courthouse, watching the final act unfold, not with fireworks, but with a verdict. Margot Blythe, self-declared president of an HOA that never existed, queen of fraudulent pipe cutting, and the woman who once claimed my sprinkler system was hydraulic terrorism, stood in front of a judge. Hair flat, eyes hollow, no clipboard in sight. Her defense team tried everything. She meant well. She misunderstood city protocols. She's passionate about landscaping. But the judge, unmoved. "Ms. Blythe," he said, voice level and firm, "you defrauded a government program, falsified public records, and endangered your neighbors through reckless, unauthorized sabotage. You mistook obsession for leadership, control for care." Then came the sentence. Fines, $92,000. Probation, 3 years. Community service, 400 hours. Ironically, to be served with the actual Parks and Recreation Department she pretended to be part of. The judge ended with one final note. You will not be allowed to participate in, found, or hold office in any HOA committee or neighborhood group for the remainder of your probation. And just like that, the reign of Margot was officially over. She walked out of that courthouse not with power, but with a pamphlet about city-approved volunteer programs and a court-ordered GPS ankle monitor. And our neighborhood? It came back to life. The signs came down, the passive-aggressive flyers disappeared, bird feeders returned like exiled citizens, even the flamingos made a glorious comeback. We built something better than an HOA. We built a real community. A block party was held that summer, the first one in 5 years. George grilled ribs, Clara made lemonade, Ravi brought back his jazz saxophone like it was 1963, and me? I just sat in a lawn chair, drink in hand, smiling as the kids ran through the sprinklers I'd rebuilt. Better, stronger, 100% Margot-proof. One neighbor walked up, nodded at the backyard and said, "You know, I used to be scared to put a gnome on my lawn." I laughed. "Now you can build a whole gnome army if you want." We high-fived, because we hadn't just stopped a fake HOA. We'd reclaimed something we forgot we had. The right to be left alone, the power of real neighbors over pretend authority, and the quiet beauty of freedom on your front lawn. So yeah, the system may have flooded, the street may have cracked, and the flamingo may have lost its neck, but in the end, we won. Not with lawsuits, not with shouting, but with facts, patience, and a little pressure in just the right place. You'd be surprised what a well-placed sprinkler and a few good people can do. What did you learn from Margot's downfall? Have your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. Hit like if you're pro-gnome and anti-clipboard dictatorship. Subscribe for more true suburban sagas. Because trust me, there's always another Karen just around the cul-de-sac. And until next time, keep your water lines tight, your lawn gnome standing tall, and your neighbors real.